Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Conversations That Count. I am Shri Lekha Pale, Vice Chair of Community, Strategy, and Engagement for Fairfax GOP and 11th Congressional District. As part of community engagement, I have been inviting community influencers, candidates, subject matter experts on Conversations That Count so they can shed light on most important topics that matter to you and me and the communities that we live in. This week, I have invited Carrie Lukas. She is the president of the Independent Women's Forum. She's also the senior fellow at the Goldwater Institute, a contributor to National Review Online, and a columnist for Forbes.com. Before her tenure at Independent Women's Forum, Lukas worked for then U.S. House of Representative Charles Christopher Chris Cox as a senior domestic policy analyst for the House Republican Policy Committee and the senior staff member of the Homeland Security Committee. Ms. Lukas earned her BA from Princeton University and her master's degree in public policy from the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University. As you can see, she's a very smart young lady. Previously, she worked at Cato Institute as a social security analyst. She has written several studies for the Cato Institute on social security and education policies. Her op-ed pieces have been published in, among other publications, in the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Post, and the USA Today. She is the author of the books, The Politically Incorrect Guide to Women, Sex, and Feminism, Liberty is No War on Women, and Checking Progressive Privilege. That's actually my personal favorite. I must admit, Checking Progressive Privilege is my personal favorite. As I said, I've read that a couple of times. Ms. Lukas is a regular guest on Thom Hartmann's show on the Air America Radio Network. And in May 2009, she even appeared on the ABC 2020 special produced by John Stossel. Without any delay, I would love to bring Ms. Lukas on this show, and I'm very excited to be talking to her. Carrie, welcome to Conversations That Count.
Thank you so much for having me on. Appreciate it.
Carrie, I am so very excited. As I was just talking to you right before we went live, on first anniversary of Independent Women's Forum, I talked to multiple people, very excited, looking forward to meeting you. Unfortunately, I couldn't meet you that day, asking to get more information about you so I could bring you on the show. Congratulations on the first anniversary of Independent Women's Forum. For folks that don't know what Independent Women's Forum is, talk to us of what that is and what about the mission? What exactly is the mission of Independent Women's Forum?
So, it's interesting. Independent Women's Forum is a public policy organization. It's kind of an educational group, kind of like a think tank, a traditional think tank, where we have a lot of scholars who cover different issues. And we've been around for a while, for 30 years, but the first anniversary was that about a year ago, we launched something called Independent Women's Network, which Independent Women's Forum has helped kind of stand up. And that's really to get people in the community involved. And so that's a new venture. And I really think it speaks to what's happening in our country right now, and really in our movement, where for a long time, there's been, a lot of people talking about public policy, but now we realize that that's not enough. We need to not only talk about issues are important, we need to have really important analysis and commentary and dig into how issues impact people. But then we need a lot of folks on the ground to get noisy. And that's what Independent Women's Network is about. And that's really what's been a lot of fun, and I think has been changed for me over this last year. And I've been really thrilled. I'm here in Fairfax County myself, and love starting to get to know people, because I hadn't really paid much attention to local government until these last couple of years, I think, like a lot of folks. And now I'm hooked. I want to also have a role or have a presence here and know what's going on.
Carrie, what exactly motivated you to start? I mean, one day, did you just get up and say, hey, let me go ahead and get started with this? I know you kind of briefly mentioned that there were a lot of issues going on. I mean, I know it's kind of hard to peel on all the issues, but was there a particular moment you said, you know what, I'm just going to do something about this?
Yeah, it's interesting, because I feel like for when you gave my very generous bio, you can tell I've been working in kind of the public policy. I was bit by the public policy bug when I was in my early 20s and became kind of a libertarian, read Ayn Rand, and went to the Cato Institute and started studying issues. And that's really been my focus for 20 some odd years. I've been working for Independent Women's Forum itself for almost 20 years now. But then it was really during COVID, when I did have, I've got 5 children in Fairfax County Public Schools. And when the schools were closed, and this was in the 2020-2021 school year, when the schools were still entirely virtual, and I had every child in my house on a computer, that's when I started thinking, like, what is going on with my school board, and who are the decision makers? And of course, I was watching at the same time really the mini revolution that was going on with people in Loudoun County, and these leaders, these brave people, these brave mom and dads around the country who started speaking out, and they started going to their school board meetings. That wasn't for me until I didn't start getting involved until the mask issue. That was kind of the final straw, when I kind of sat on the sidelines, written the emails and done things like that, but I hadn't been motivated to really make a stand and really try to speak out until Fairfax County Public Schools refused to let kids take masks off. And my youngest son is 7 years old. He had never been in school without a mask, and I thought it was so infuriating. So that's when I started kind of jumping into the local politics and local activism.
Carrie, I think you wouldn't be surprised how many parents are irate at then and even now. So, Carrie, I do a lot of research when I bring in guests to my podcast. And I've kind of like researched Independence Women Forum, looked into different chapters, spoke to several of your peers. And I see that Independent Women's Forum focuses on culture, economy, health, innovation, law, education, national security, politics, work, very relevant topics, especially now more than ever. But among these, Carrie, I'm just curious to know, what are the top 3 policies that you work on or just focuses on a daily basis? If you wake up with along with 5 children, you're like, okay, what are the top 3 things that you're like, let me just focus on them for this week today?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I am, IWF now has over 30 employees. So I have a lot of just fabulous people who work on energy issues and the economy. I had always, when my focus over the last several years has been childcare and paid leave policy. But honestly, I feel like in the last year or so, maybe a little longer than that, I've been motivated by really one issue. Like, one thing has really been something that's been like a big focus, and that's this the assault on the concept of women. And I think that this is something, again, I had been somebody who was much more focused on economics and, kind of dollars and cents and liked numbers and things like that. And then when the drumbeat started happening of women being erased from law, when all of a sudden you had the Bostock decision, there was a Supreme Court decision which decided that discrimination law, sex discrimination included gender identity, which all of a sudden meant that men identifying as women were afforded like access to spaces that were meant for women. I consider myself pretty libertarian about most social issues, and but this one got to me. I said, I have teenage daughters. I've got 3 daughters. I care a lot about women's rights, and this was the first time where I felt very much like, like we were back in the 1970s and said, wait a second, you mean that you're going to ask these girls who have been working so hard to be the best swimmers in the country, or these runners, or in these contact sports or semi-contact sports like lacrosse? I have daughters who play lacrosse. And all of a sudden a guy, like a male-bodied athlete, is going to come and ask them to step aside. And that really got to me. And so certainly, like right now, one of the big focuses at Independent Women's Forum is defending this concept of women. We launched something called the Women's Bill of Rights. And it's very simple. It's been introduced in the House and Congress now as a resolution. We came up with kind of the model idea and this and the wording, and now it's been turned into legislation. But all it does is codify the idea that women, the word woman, is biologically based, and it defines woman as an adult female, and male as this intrinsically biological state. all these things we need to make sure that, just in the Violence Against Women's Act, the word woman is used over 200 times. We need to know what that word means, right? We need to, for a legal purpose, that really matters. So that's one of our really big focuses and priorities.
Carrie, that is such a good thing that you're focused on. Carrie, believe it or not, in being in conservative world, I know this has been going on for a while, and I cared for it as much, and I thought at least I cared for it. And a few months back, I went to ACSM. It's a conference, American College of Sports Medicine, and I sat through a symposium focused on Title IX. And there was a lady that actually was an athlete that fought for while this Title IX was going on, who was obviously a seasoned, mature athlete. And I think that she inspired me to actually look into this issue. It just really put me into a perspective of how much they fought for it to kind of make sure that the ladies really had a front seat on it. That made me think it took them so hard. They fought hard and long to get this, and we can't let it go. We can't just let any government come in and dilute the issue to this extent. Thanks to all of you for being one of those leading power on this.
Well, it's been so gratifying, and it's really interesting because this is one where this isn't so much about being a conservative. This is about being somebody who believes in common sense and that words matter, that language matters. And this basic concept of kind of fairness and just, decency. We brought together a lot of women, a lot of conservatives, of course, but then also some from the principled left, where we agree on very little other than this idea that that women are women and that it is not okay for men to be invited into their spaces. I thought it was really important. I've been really encouraged at how many people are coming out and now supporting these female athletes. A year ago, people who spoke out, those kind of early athletes who said, hey, wait a minute, I don't think it's fair. I'm going to have to compete. This, 6'2" man has just entered my, my running competition, that they risk being canceled. Certainly when the University of Pennsylvania began allowing this, formerly Will Thomas to come and start competing against or playing on the women's swimming team, the women on that swim team were told that they should not complain, that if they risked losing their spot on the team, if they spoke up, this fully intact male-bodied athlete was all of a sudden in their locker rooms and getting changed in front of them. He still dates women. And so it sounds like he was pretty disrespectful to some of these girls. And it was a kind of thing that just was very galling. And anyway, so we've been able to work with some of those athletes and help them get their voice out and kind of, I think, show them that they should speak out, that yes, there's going to be people who come and attack them and say terrible things about them on social media, but who cares? There's a lot of us out there also rooting for them.
Good for you. Good for you. I always say, God bless you guys for being out there for us. So, Carrie, let's talk about some of these sectors, be it manufacturing, energy, medicine, education, innovative products, right? But there are these, again, government actions like regulations, higher taxes. They reduce choice and discourage innovations. What are your thoughts on that? Does Independent Women's Forum work on those things too?
Absolutely. We work, we have always said, we have a saying that all issues are women's issues, and that sometimes too many people want to pigeonhole women as only caring about things that have to do with children and things like that. But in fact, women care intensely about things like energy policy, and energy and inflation are ones that, women tend to be the ones who are dealing with, we're the ones who get supplies and kind of keep the family budgets, and are seeing right now just the really devastating impact that the country is suffering from because of our inflationary economic policies. So absolutely, we care about those issues. One of the ones that's close to my heart and that I focus a lot on in terms of public policy is this idea of what workplace flexibility means, because it's unfortunate that a lot of the government tends to want to mandate flexibility and say, yes, it's so important for women to have a flexible workplace, so we're going to say that every company has to offer women exactly this, or their employees exactly this. that is the opposite of flexibility. What we really need and what women benefit from is when we have a robust economy where there's a lot of job opportunity and that women have the potential to customize their job. And we can't pretend that, there's often sometimes regulations which seek to make it impossible to reward people for working longer and harder. And that's wrong. If you are a woman who chooses to step back and focus on your kids, which I've done at different times. There's like most people have made sacrifices in their careers for their kids. That's okay, and women are often willing to make trade-offs with their with how much they earn and with their role in the workplace, to have that flexibility. So that's one that's really one I really enjoy and I think is important.
It's amazing when you said the women's issues are all issues, right? I mean, it's really not nice to say women's only focus on pro-life issues or they only focus on this issues. I mean, I always say that we are 51% of voter base. Our issues are all issues. It need not be just childcare issues. It need not be just, don't minimize what we do. Our issues.
Exactly. Yes, absolutely. Although, it's interesting because I do want to mention childcare because I feel like that's another one that's been such an important conversation over the last year, because really there was almost a radical change where the federal government was threatening to, with the original Build Back Better, was threatening to have the federal government take over childcare and really set the regulations. And I thought that was such an incredibly dangerous move. And I'm really proud of Independent Women's Forum's role in that, because we started pushing back, not just because it was really expensive. Of course, it was insanely expensive, and with money we don't have, and would have heightened inflation even more. But really, the thing that I worried about was that is that you don't want, if the federal government becomes the sole funder of childcare, basically carries the purse strings, they are going to be setting the decision on curriculum and every problem we see in our K through 12 schools today, from bad teacher quality, from disciplinary problems with politicized curriculums, the gender stuff, that would all be coming down to 0 through 5. It's madness, given all the problems we have with our elementary and secondary schools, to say, oh yeah, let's double down on that and have the government in charge of our 1-year-olds. It's crazy. So that's something I think we really need to speak clearly about. There's a lot of ways to help parents with little kids. Having a federal takeover of childcare is completely not what our country needs.
Absolutely not. Parents should be responsible for their children. For sure.
Exactly.
So Carrie, I've watched a lot of your videos. I know you have been actually doing these interviews for a decade or two at this point. So you have spoken a lot about culture when no one was speaking about culture. Apparently our culture also pressurizes us as women to subscribe to certain ways of thinking. Those who deviate from politically correct thinking risk being canceled. I think you spoke about cancel culture before the word cancel even existed. Yeah. This cancel culture threatens civilized discourse. So it shouldn't come as a surprise then that sadly diversity of thought is often missing in the mainstream media. What do you think? Is this a new phenomenon? But I've heard you speak about it even 5 years back.
Yeah, it's interesting. I really think this is like a fascinating topic, and I'm actually encouraged. I think we're at a point where things are getting a little bit better. For years, I think for as long as, for decades now, everyone has talked about the idea of this liberal media bias, this idea that for as long as there's been network TV, that they had a slant towards, Democratic candidates or gave favorable coverage to kind of a more liberal perspective. I think that's happened forever. I a few years ago wrote it's really a booklet that you mentioned on progressive privilege, because I thought it was interesting putting it in context of kind of using the left's language, and to not to dig too deep into this, but I read one of the original pieces where the concept of privilege was discussed, and it was written by a white woman. And she described like the privilege of being white. And this was written in the 1980s. And I was all prepared to kind of dismiss it and say, this is nonsense or whatever, because it had been so kind of stretched by 2019 when I was looking at this. But actually, I found a lot of it made some sense. This idea of of the fact that, that when you walked into the toy aisle, that there was all these like white dolls, and that the skin cream for, as a woman, if you walk in to get a foundation, that, that most of them matched my color, and it was, it was more Caucasian. And there was all these things where I thought, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And that there is this, like, being the dominant culture made it so that this is something that I should be aware of as privilege. But if you look at that, and how now today, the way that conservatives are treated, we are truly like lacking privilege. And it's a liberal, I think, excuse me, a back to school night or something where you're in a room of parents, and how, I would go into some place and somebody would like proudly have an Obama shirt, or now you'll see something with like an obscene statement about Trump, or people talk very confidently about how right they are about with all of their positions. I feel like for a long time, conservatives were encouraged and really felt as though we had to keep our head down, or we were going to be tarred as racist, homophobic, sexist. We wwe were guilty until proven innocent. And we had this baggage where we were seen as, we had a barrier to overcome when you're meeting two people. That's the definition of privilege. Progressives have this privilege that conservatives didn't have and would have to earn. So I think it's important to I think that's like kind of helps in putting in a language that they should be able to understand. And now I think with cancel culture, it's been taken to a whole new level, but it's so outrageous that I think a lot of people are saying enough. We can't just, this is not how discourse is supposed to be. And you don't want people being tossed out and judged, and it removed from polite society when they, for one awkward phrase or whatever, or for an unpopular idea.
Absolutely. Carrie, I want to go back to one thing that you told about choices. I think you just mentioned about choices and greater flexibility and so on and so forth. I think we should celebrate those choices and find ways to improve opportunities, so each woman can pursue their own vision of happiness without government dictating or boxing us and saying, these are the choices you should be making. And I think you also basically mentioned that government is reforming things or expanding government programs. But instead of expanding government programs and dictating for us, what do you think policymakers can do or find ways to give us more options so we have the more freedom to decide, or give us compensations, or how can they provide us more resources, and how can they give us more freedom?
Yeah.
What is important for our families?
That's such a fundamental and important question. And I do think the number one thing they can do is start getting out of the way. If you look at something, it was interesting when I was recently researching for testimony I was doing on the childcare question. I started going through some of the regulations that are out there that govern like home daycare centers, and it's sickening when you look at some of the hoops that people jump through when they want to start a daycare center. And that means housing 5-6 kids in your house to care for them in your home. The minutia that was regulated, things like how many balls of what sizes you have to have, specifically, specific toys you have to have. All of these things where a house, like, I've got 5 kids in this house, and right now there's more kids running around, their friends. And my house would never be able to pass that standard to open a daycare center. And yet we wonder why daycare is so hard to find in so many parts of the country, and why it's so expensive. Well, it's because of these terrible regulations which push providers out and make it really impossible for entrepreneurs to enter the business. So that's just one example, but I think that's replete throughout our economic system, where we do have just mind-boggling layers of unnecessary regulation, which raise costs. I worry that anything that the government does to start trying to incentivize workplace flexibility is going to backfire. So that's why I really think removing them is getting back to this idea that government regulation should only be to protect against true safety and security and exploitation issues, and then letting people find opportunities that work for them. And you're right that there's so much. We are, for all of the bad that we talk about and we see in our country and our culture today, we are so lucky, especially as women, being able to have the option to work from home, technologies that make it so, and even if you are mostly an office worker, the fact that you can say, oh, I'm going to jump on the phone call instead while I pick up my kid, and everybody gets this. Women are powerful workers now. You don't have to explain to somebody that you need to go pick up your kid, because they probably are a working mom too, or a working dad, and know about these things. That's very different than even when I was starting out as a young person in the office 20 years ago or 25 years ago. It was much rarer that you were going to see a working mom in that situation. Now it's completely common. So we have so many new paradigms of working. We should really celebrate that and then encourage it more.
Absolutely, Carrie. And I also think that we bring such unique perspective to critical issues ranging anywhere from healthcare to national defense to education. I think we need to be celebrated without being feared of being shamed or mocked or silenced. And I think we have such great potential for leadership positions. And I just don't think we are being explored as much as we should be.
Yeah.
Carrie, I really, really like the books. I was telling you the books that you have written. I want to explore a little more about the Checking Progressive Privilege. I think it's a thought-provoking book that challenges us to rethink privilege. My question to you is, can privilege expand beyond race, gender, and sexual orientation to include worldviews? If so, is there such a thing as progressive privilege? I know you spoke a bit about it, but I would love for you to expand on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it was interesting when I first started researching for this book. I was very much prepared to kind of dismiss this concept entirely. And then instead, I did start thinking no, there certainly are privileged categories and privileged positions that we all hold, and things that are, things that people get dealt different hands, and some are easier than the others. And that's just the truth. And we all have to make do with what we have. But certainly today, when we're looking at kind of those different how these things stack out and how we're striving to treat people as individuals and not pigeonholing them, and making it possible for people to use their time and talents to their fullest potential. Certainly right now, there is a bias against there's an ideological privilege is certainly when you look at how in colleges in particular if you look at grad schools, who is being allowed to kind of become elevated in grad schools, and who is being allowed to become the tenured professors and get these cushy jobs. Frankly, then it's not even just in academia. Now we see in companies where they literally are starting to have boxes, and it honestly, as a woman, it makes me sick to think that there's a box that say oh, we need a girl for that one, so therefore we're going to choose you, which is just, it's so depressing because it makes it impossible for us to win, because we're not even allowed to compete on a fair playing field because we know we're part of a rigged game. So I think that there's that this concept of privilege has backfired in some way, as people have tried to address privilege by making by elevating the quote unprivileged and giving them new space. And then certainly the true bias and true prejudice against people with conservative or not liberal viewpoints is certainly a problem that we see throughout our economy and our culture.
So, Carrie, in America, let's talk about not only, I work in organizations, and all of us do at this point, in all aspects of our life. We value diversity, and we should. But in certain, let's say if you walk in the campus, my kid goes to a campus. Yeah, we strive to find a single Black person, a non-Christian, a gay person. You want to find different representation of modern America. Yet on many campuses, you may not find a registered Republican. So in almost every academic, especially campuses, you find only liberal faculty members. Why is that? Why is there not a conscious effort being made to find a conservative counterparts? What can we do to change that?
Yeah,
other than having this good discussion.
Yeah, I think that the number one thing is to have discussions like this and get noisy about it, to start complaining, start talking. You kindly read my bio where I went to Princeton, I went to Harvard, and I wouldn't give those places a dime. I would never, I think we should stop. We should stop giving money to higher education institutions that are completely hostile to to our values and to ideological diversity. I think that these places are now actively trying to make the country a worse place, and really are like prejudice against conservatives in a way that we shouldn't patronize. It's not okay. And I think we need to have those conversations and speak very clearly about that. It's interesting. I remember back when I was in grad school, and I was at this, class of 60, and they were having a discussion. It was supposed to be an ethics class on abortion, and they literally had this class of 60. There was no one who was willing to stand up and make the principled pro-life position. And that should be something that anybody should be able to do if you have paid attention enough. In the same way, you and I would know the pro-choice argument. We know what they say. You should be able to know what the different sides of are. And it's bad for, it's not just not fair. It's not just discriminating against conservative students and conservative thinkers and potential professors. It's really robbing everyone of an education, because those kids who are sitting there and just in a complete echo chamber of woke leftism, they're not being served by their university. They are not learning critical thinking and how to argue and how to see through another person's eyes. You're right that it's embarrassing how much their focus on diversity has become the most obvious and really in so many ways the most trivial things of, like, what's your skin pigmentation, and that's how we're going to judge diversity, instead of life experiences and viewpoints and belief systems. This is it's sad, I think, what's happened to our university system, and we got to keep calling them out, because there's lasting consequences. We ignored it for too long, and now we're reaping the fruits of it today.
So, Carrie, I think if I heard you right, you said do not boycott them. Talk about it, give a pushback.
Yeah. Don't give them your money. Don't give them your money. Yeah, don't you get these fundraising letters from your alma mater, and if they're bad, you don't do it just out of habit, because there's so many great causes out there, for heaven's sakes, that are more deserving than these bloated money wasting. The fact that this student loan just went through makes me so angry when I think of Harvard sitting there with, what is it, billions and billions
$42 billion, I think.
Yeah, I mean, they should pay this. Why is the the hardworking electrician and plumber, why are they going to get charged or have $2,000 of national debt on their head for these, to bail out these increasingly evil higher education institutions that hate them, don't respect them, and then are trying to teach students to despise our country. So
absolutely,
I get mad about that one.
One other thing that I also tell folks is do not shy away from writing articles or writing blogs in these mainstream medias too. Go onto them versus boycotting them, because if you boycott them, then you don't have a voice at all. Then you're kind of speaking to choir. You're only talking amongst yourself. I said, go on the mainstream media and talk to them as well. What do you think of that?
Oh, absolutely. I think we need to speak anywhere you can. I think that you should be and realize, I think that one of the things that is another kind of wonderful development over the last year or two is how many people realized how big a difference being willing to go out there. You think about all of these people, and I'm so impressed. I came very late to the game in terms of speaking out at schools. When I look at people like Asra Namani, Nicole Solis out in Rhode Island, all the folks, Ian Pryor, and all the great team out there in Loudoun, who started just not being afraid when they got a lot of hate, and just kept the pressure on. And there's been real impact. There's impact here in Virginia in terms of how many people decided to reject the teacher union candidate and vote for Governor Youngkin. But then there's been an impact, really around the country of people starting to make a change. So yeah, everybody has the potential to be a reporter, a journalist. You've got a phone, you've got a camera. You've got the ability to write and to publish yourself both on mainstream things and then also just using social media platforms.
Absolutely. So, Carrie, I'm glad you brought up Asra Namani. I really enjoy her writings. I enjoy what she has to say, and so on and so forth. So you're a mother of 5 children in Fairfax County Public Schools yourself. I always say good education encompassing not just those 3 R's, right? Reasoning, resilience, and responsibility. You got to have those civics and character traits as well. So what do you think is going on around here in schools? Do you think our K through 12 education, higher education, is that providing good opportunities for every child, or what do you think is going on?
It's certainly not doing all that it could. And I want to, it's funny. I always hate when especially when you're doing something on a quick TV thing on Fairfax County Public Schools, you don't have time to say, I know personally, there's a lot of great teachers out there, and I love some of my kids' teachers, and there's part of my kids' education, which is so good. And we've got so many great students and great parents who are involved. But man, the school board is doing everything they can to undermine that and to distract from what should be the core of education. And that's what's so frustrating. There's a lot of good in the schools, but then there's so much unnecessary bad. You saw it this week when you looked at some of the, it came out, and I love that there was a whistleblower or somebody who took pictures of the training material that was being forced upon Fairfax County Public School teachers that showed how they were being instructed to keep gender identity issues from parents, which is insane. Literally, I get my really nice, lovely, the school nurse at my local elementary school. She calls every time my daughter bumps her knee at recess and needs a Band-Aid, or somebody bangs into somebody else and they need an ice pack. I get a phone call so that they know, hey, your kid had to come to the nurse. Here's what happened. It's no big deal, but just I am obliged to tell you this. Well, I frankly don't even really care about my kid's bumped knee or the fact that he or she needed an ice pack, but I would care intensely if they were considering, changing their gender identity, or were going through this, having these massive questions about themselves. And yet that is what these schools are actively trying to keep from parents and keep treating parents as if they're the enemy. It's crazy. And it shows a hostility to parents that I think is totally inappropriate.
Absolutely, Carrie. Carrie, I can't let you go without asking a couple more questions as a follow-up about Independent Women's Network.
Sure.
So how if any parent that is listening to this would like to get involved, how do they get involved in Independent
Yes.
Women's Network?
Well, please come. You can just go online to iwnetwork.com, and you can see, you need to give an email, and then you can get into our community, and you'll start seeing that we have some chapter meetings around here. We hold events. We encourage people to take action. I was able to encourage some folks to start, writing to the school board and complaining about masking policies, and connected with just some great people. I've met so many wonderful people around Fairfax County who've got one of our emails from Independent Women's Network and started getting involved and working to change things. So this is just, we just started out, we've got chapters, we've got about 20 chapters around the country now, a couple of thousand members, and we're just trying to make a difference and work with each other so we can get active both on a local level and a national level.
So if they want to open a chapter for themselves, I know there are already several chapters. Can they just join in with the chapter, or can they open their own chapter?
You sign up with your email and you find out who is where, if there's some place near you, and if there's something close, you can start going to that chapter meeting, or you can certainly start a chapter wherever you are, and we've got people to help support and make that happen.
Excellent. And also one last question for you, Carrie. I'm a healthcare professional, so whoever comes in, I'll definitely have to ask. I know one of the policy questions that I had in Independent Women's Forum is overall, as you know, healthcare poses a very high cost burden for Americans because we lack a competitive, transparent, patient-centered marketplace. And structural reform is needed. And I see that Independent Women's Forum has been focused on healthcare. What are you guys currently doing about healthcare reform?
It's interesting. I feel like healthcare is one of those that's it's such a hard issue. It's so hard to make progress. I feel like ever since Obamacare happened, we've been just on this slow, not so slow, kind of a steady march in the wrong direction, with there being less transparency, less competition, more people really pushed onto government roles. And I think that's something that we try to talk a lot about, is helping people understand that increasing Medicaid roles isn't good, that that's not what we want, that when people are on Medicaid, they have worse health outcomes than when they're uninsured. That the more people we put on Medicaid, the more people don't get seen, who, safety nets are supposed to help those who really, really need it. And if everybody's in a safety net, that means that there's many fewer resources for each individual person. And I think that's what's happened a lot with Medicaid. So we try to talk about the need to try to pull people out of Medicaid, help them get into the private market, increase price transparency. That's something that we've talked, that we write a lot. But I think healthcare is one where how you described it was perfect, that's the vision of where we need to go. It's just really hard to get people to understand the steps. It's so easy for the left and the powers that be that want a one size, a government run single payer system to demonize anything that moves in that direction. So we're trying to keep the drumbeat of why we do need market-based, transparent, competitive healthcare for the good of everyone, and to keep safety nets reserved for those who really need it, and not just make everyone in the safety net. But it's tough, as I'm sure you know.
I think something you said, price transparency is the way to go. I think that's what is lacking in the healthcare system. I think it's extremely important for consumers to kind of understand going into the hospital of what they're going to be paying for before they can make a choice of what really, if they want to get the test or not, especially if it is an elective procedure. They just really need to understand the cost of their healthcare system.
Yeah, it really is. I do think it's one of those that I wish we could have a more of a conversation in this country to say, why is it that this is the one time where you never get an estimate up front? I wouldn't have anybody, you ask before basically everything. How much is this, somebody's going to fix my car. How much is that going to cost? And, how much is this going to cost to have your house address? Everything. We always know, you see a menu, you know how much it's going to cost. You don't come in, eat everything you can, and then say, oh, what's this bill? And then, oh, good, somebody else is going to pay it. And yet that's why we have how healthcare works. We never see a menu. We never have any sense of trade-offs when it comes to cost. And then we all wonder why healthcare is so dang expensive,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Carrie, where do you see Independent Women's Forum go in 5 years? Where do you see yourself?
Oh my gosh.
Forum.
Yeah, it's
or
funny.
Even in 2 years for that matter.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's interesting. One thing I've realized is that I never would have thought 5 years ago that we'd be so focused on defending this core concept of the word woman. So, I really, and, obviously COVID threw everybody for a loop. So who knows what's going to come at us from left field. But I really do see us as really focused on not just being a group of, I'm proud. I love all of my great scholars that are doing really hard work and are thoughtful and educated and are testifying before Congress and doing really important kind of thought work. We want to do that and expand more. My big focus is helping more normal people, especially women, find their voice, find where they can have an impact, help them have the courage and the resources they need so they can make a difference where they are. Because I do think that this battle is not going to be won with anyone, any big policy change or any success coming from Washington. It's going to be just, every single little town out there having positive changes happening where they live. So that's why we need to get as many people involved. So I'm hoping we can have thousands and thousands of very smart, thoughtful activists making a difference.
Absolutely, Carrie. I have no doubt that with your enthusiasm and intelligence and the will and the grit and perseverance, I can only see it that you'll be doing such great work with women. And please note that since you're in Fairfax County, Fairfax GOP and 11th Congressional District will back you up no matter what you want to do. And I'm very passionate about healthcare and women in general.
Yeah.
And I will be more than happy to assist you in anything that you would like to pursue in healthcare industry. Thank you so much for joining us. And you really did not know much about the work that we were willing to do, but you were willing to come in and join us on this podcast and spend time with us. We appreciate you and the great work that you are doing on behalf of Independent Women's Network.
Well, thank you so much. And I love this, and I appreciate everything you're doing for this district and for this county. So thanks, and thanks to everybody who joined in.
Thank you. Thank you all viewers for joining us on this Friday evening. We look forward to bringing in this great speakers and to look forward to your engagement as well. We also will have another great session next Friday on Friday, September 9th. We'll skip a week. We'll have a great labor weekend, hopefully next weekend. And we will see all of you on Friday, September 9th at 5:30 p.m. with Hans Juan Spakovsky. Hopefully I said that right. He's an attorney and the manager of Heritage Foundation's Election Law Reform Initiative. Hope all of you will tune in at this point. Have a wonderful weekend. God bless America. God bless you all and have a great evening. Thank you again.